So, it's the cloudiest morning it has been in a long time. It might clear up, might not. I hope it doesn't. It's such an annoying thing to walk in the hot sun here. It's a high elevation. And it's too sunny. That's why I need to build more places with shade and make sure that I sculpt the trees in ways that I end up with lots and lots of shade everywhere all year round. Because like right now, this white oak provides zero shade. That black one does provide shade. And so one of many projects is to, underneath any shady tree, increase the amount of shade around it by planting lower level trees. That's a really big oak, so its shade is going to move around a lot during the day. But by having smaller trees that are denser, we can have full shade all day long in many, many spots. But that's not the goal of today's video. The goal of today's video is to evaluate gullies. One gully in particular. And we'll see what I think when I'm on site. But I've been there before, so I have some ideas. It's a soft gully. You can walk across it. And so we could leave it alone. And that's the best thing to do. Permaculture principle 0, do nothing. It's a good one. The other one is to do things to it. And that is to improve its use for humans and also for growing plants. It is a microclimate naturally. It has more moisture than other places. It's actually quite shady, this one is. And that's good because there is such intense solar radiation here that getting out of the sun is good for both plants and humans. I brought my GPS and hopefully I'll be able to walk from the bottom of it to the top of it. It's not super far, and maybe some of the dew of the morning will evaporate and I won't get wet doing it. Oh, I just got wet passing that tree. Oh, I'm so wet. That's not what guys usually say. Anyway, I want to terrace it. And I'll be hand terracing. There's no way to get a bulldozer in there, and it's too small a barranca, too delicate of a system to want to bulldoze it. Because it does take years for a bulldoze spot to repair. And I want this one to be really gorgeous within 5 years and usable instantly. So my thought is this. How far should the terraces be apart? Well, there's no one answer to that, but the first thought that comes to mind is to have, first of all, we don't want to put a trail down the middle of it because then, moisture would just go down the middle of it. Rain would just go down the middle of it. And we're not looking at keyline design where we're trying to move moisture away from the middle either, because we want a moist spot. We want that water to be gathering there. However, there are benefits to having terraces and flat spots, and that is they're easier to walk on and use, and some of it could still be sloped. That's just fine. But what I'm imagining is a trail away from the gully that goes up the hill. So we take care of our human transport, our foot transport, going all the way up and down that hill away from there. That's the actual transport area. And then trails that cross through the gully on contour that allow you to enter it and go to the other side. The first height that I would imagine having would be sitting height, so that you terrace to a level. It's not, well, it's very slopey in part and not in others, and I'll see that today. I didn't walk the whole thing, but in places where it isn't that slopey, we cut smaller terraces just to the level, to the depth where the upper side is the height you would sit on. that means we've got automatically a whole bunch of places to sit right there. And we can plant on those. We can plant oregano. I guess we need to look at what can stain clothing or not. But things you can sit on that are pretty tough and don't die. We could, of course, put on some of those same terraces metal outdoor furniture, like cast aluminum. And some of the terraces could just be for human use. There could be a fire pit in one. There could be some of them just for plant propagation. That would be great because I'm very into direct in-ground cuttings. And some of those trails that enter into it could even be slanted towards that spot, particularly ones to a spot like that, where you're getting more water into those baby plants that don't have roots yet. They're pieces, they're cuttings. Because here you can do cuttings right directly in the ground, and those will be producing more plants. I also had a garden like that for agaves once, where I just planted agave seeds and then slowly harvested out the babies as they got bigger, and they do it at different rates. So you harvest out the bigger ones to make more room for the smaller ones. And you could have a whole garden just dedicated to that, just to spew out every year more and more agaves. Easily done, very easy to manage. Have a tiny little walking spot through it, and then all your baby plants there. And then, they'll take 3 years before they get to the point where you want to move them. You might have to move the leaves off of them in that particular spot because I think it's all oaks in there, if I recall. And those oaks the white oaks will drop their leaves on them and cover them up, and they'll die. So you need to be able to uncover the little baby plants so they don't get killed off. There's not too many pines, which is good because pines also will sometimes shed their needles and cover up plants and make the soil too acidic. So we really could start to make a list of the different types of spots in the barranca you would want, in the ravine, the gully. Now, where the slope is less, we would think of the bench level, doing it at bench level, having the trail be below that so that you could sit on top of it, right? Now, there isn't a reason for a car level crossing right now, but there would be later. And so at the very top of it, there's a different road that I need to consider that's going to do a big loop through the area. So there's one spot you set aside as a potential car crossing in the future, which determines its width. And then if you did a lower car crossing, which is a more obvious spot in my mind to have one for different reasons, then you've got two. And if those are one lane, that's difficult. 2 lanes is very, very wide for that amount of space available. So that's a little tougher one to think about. The other one to think about is, would we want a hut in there? Now, a hut's height is going to be, let's say, as tall as I can reach. I'm 6 feet tall, right? 182 centimeters, something like that. And there's a thickness of the roof. We want to use that roof for rain capture, although there's going to be leaves on it, so you'd have to sweep it a lot. But any structure you have, ideally, would be collecting water, especially anything upwards. Now, the upper spot, I think, is steeper. And the steeper it is, then you could put in a smaller hut that cuts in the slope like that. And, I mean, you could do it anywhere. I'd be almost more tempted not to do that there, and that's because of something I'm trying to avoid saying, but I can't help it. It's part of the design of the spot, and that is that the other side of the gully is not owned by the owner of the rest of the land. In other words, there's a different property owner, and they share that gully. Okay, that's their barrier. And so I don't know who that owner is, and the owner of the land I'm going to go visit also does not know who that owner is. So we can't talk to him about it, unfortunately. We could draw up the plan, find the owner, and say, can we do this? But we're also not trying to encourage development on that land unless we can buy it. But the point is that this could serve both sides. That's another reason to have your trail be off to the side so that that becomes a very private park in there. You may even be planting hedgerow on either side of it to keep animals from crossing it, to keep people from crossing it, and to have points of entry into it. But anyway, both parties would have the advantage of a better designed gully, even though they share ownership of it. Because some gullies around here just become places to dump garbage, which is a terrible use of a gully. It's a microclimate. Why would you want to pollute it? It's stupid. So I would tend not to go with the building level terrace. I've got other gullies that are far bigger and wider, and those could have an entire row of buildings built into the ground that go all the way across and make it easy to walk across it and enjoy the view. Perhaps people could even enjoy the view from on top of it. So people are walking on top of a concrete roof of a kind of hidden and private building, right? And so the people living in it would have immense privacy, but it also provides a great walking route. I mean, I'm thinking of one place in particular. That's a very different problem set because it's a big, huge, wide gully, like 20 times wider than the one we're going to look at today. So we're going to rule out buildings because of ownership issues. It could be that both parties, both owners, would benefit if there was a simple structure that provided shade right there. But I'm thinking, why not that you just then dig into the side of it? It gets rid of the ownership issue of structures. Dig into the side of it in a spot inside of where the trail is, right? And the trail might have to zigzag because it's steep enough that walking straight up it's going to be a pain in the ass. And so it's more likely that you would create a zigzag trail that goes up this slope. And that's an interesting thing to think about. It does use up more land, but it'd be far more comfortable to walk it. And off the points of each point in that zigzag, you have a trail that goes in both directions. One zigzag on the non-gully side goes off in that direction, and the points closer to the gully go into the gully and enter in properly into a terrace. And so we're really designing this like a park, a vivero, a nursery, a plant nursery. I guess those are the main uses. The other thing is just to have pretty plants all around it. A lot of those plants, I mean, the highest value of it is as a nursery. And a shaded spot to sit, because it's very shady in there. Also, it's the farthest extent of that land, so it uses a spot that's far from everything else. It could be really nice. Now, on the side of it, putting in some roofs would be nice because you could have those be like really natural offices, a desk, a chair. It could even have almost nothing. You could have buried cables run electric to it, so you could write there. It would be an amazing spot. And it feels like you're losing that, but no, you're not. You're using it for its highest benefit. And the other owner is unlikely to develop it anytime soon, but hopefully the other owner would be a known person or an agreeable person who likes the vision, and they also want to make their side be a park as well, because that's the highest value. A quiet, nice spot that's just a little bit cooler. And I guess if you're both owners of the barranca, you could share in using it as plant reproduction. Because like here, I can put a piece of rosemary in the ground in a moisture spot, and it will grow into a rosemary during the rainy season, and then you can move it out of there and put it somewhere more difficult. And so every year, this thing could just be spewing out thousands of little plants to fill the rest of the property with. And you wouldn't even bother putting plants in there that don't benefit from that, perhaps. I could imagine that if you were going to kill white oaks that don't provide shade during the hottest time of the year, you could kill a few of those. That would let a little bit more light in, but in this climate, light's not the problem. A semi-shaded spot acts like a place with full sun here. So the rules are just different. And this is true for every single Köppen climate zone. If you don't know what a Köppen climate zone is, that's K-O-P-P-E-N climate zone. And it's a system of categorizing climates. Find out what Köppen climate zone you're in. Look it up. That determines what you should plant. And you may want to plant things that are in nearby Köppen zones that are similar to yours. And I guess I need to go through and make a list. There's already a list of all the Köppen climate zones. But which ones are most similar to the other? And surprisingly, it isn't necessarily the ones that are closest to each other. Because you could have a big mountain range, right? And as soon as you start to go up, the whole climate changes. So just a zone being next to another zone isn't meaningful enough to think, oh, well, I'll plant the stuff that's over there. I mean, that's the obvious thought, and I've thought that for a long time. But when I really think about it, and I realize when I'm combining that with the topography, that isn't really how it works. So I need to make a more complex way of looking at how one Köppen climate zone relates to another. And things will grow out of zone. It's not as rigid as you might think. And I think that, first, it's easy to make a list of the plants we already know grow well in a particular zone. That's easy. And we should plant lots of those. No irrigation, no fertilizer. Preferably ones that produce food or something valuable for people, because then people will care about them more. But it could be animal food. That's fine too. And I usually am talking about perennials, like trees and things that keep on living. But, we can also look at that for annuals in different areas and figure out what is the list of annuals you would grow there. I just don't tend to think about that because that's such short-term thinking. But annuals, obviously, there's lots of really valuable annuals, so that's fine to think about as well. What else about gullies? So we've stayed away from it with the trail. And that trail, by the way, may hook into or go next to or connect up with a road. Because I know where I want to put a road more or less. That's a much bigger decision. And that road also may need to zigzag in there. And with the GPS, we could actually, or even just, there's a good topographical map of it because it had a guy with a drone came and made a great map. And so you could actually calculate, because you never want a road over about 10%. I think the extreme limit is 15% as far as worldwide design of these things, where 15% is too harsh to walk up. And so I've often said 12 is good. But damn, it would be nice to not go over 10%. That means it goes up 1 foot or 1 meter for every 10 that it goes across, right? Not very slopey. 12 surely should be okay though as well. And I need to actually have spots on my land where I have trails and roads and I measure each one and I label them because people need to learn how these look and how they work. This is a great idea. And have a sign there that says this road is at X slope. And people could say, oh, this road is very steep. It would be hard to get up it in the rain. It's not paved, Or if we did have a road there, we would want it paved so that you could use it when it was rainy. And that would help me because I have a hard time picturing what does a 10% slope look like. There's also in a nearby town, the steepest road I know of around here. It would be really fun to go down there as an experiment and measure the elevation of the top and the bottom of it and then calculate the slope because that's so slopey I don't like to use it. I think it's San Francisco, isn't it, that has they claim to have the steepest road in the world and the curviest road in the world, stuff like that. Well, those would be great to look up. But that is not what you actually want to build. I did mention zigzag. With the zigzag, I'd have to look up how those work. Because it seems like there's a turning radius issue, and I'm trying to keep the footprint of roads pretty low, but there's a turning radius you have to have for a certain size of vehicle. And so the sharper the point, the bigger the turning radius you have to clear out for that. And I guess it could curve, but then a curved road going on a slope actually has different slopes in it, I would imagine. I mean, I guess it depends on how much area you've got, right? I mean, it seems like on the corners it would go up, but if you went up, not up a bunch, not in the corner, then your curve could be sharper, but then you got the turning radius thing again. Now, obviously, vehicles are made to handle a 90-degree turning radius, but by definition, a zigzag is usually not going to be a turning radius. You're not going to have a 90-degree thing. I mean, we could draw that on the map. We could just say, okay, what if it was just all 90 degrees? You go up here, you go over there, you go over there. What would the slope be? And I think it's going to be too much for that spot because the upper part of it's really slopey. So I'm sure somebody's already written about that, about like how much space do you have? How much can you go up? So like, yeah, let's assume a 12% up, then how, I mean, this is why I like the idea of automating GIS systems, Geographic Information Systems, I think that stands for, I don't know. In that it could actually take a slope and you could say, I want a road that goes from here to there, and it could suggest for you how to do that. Like, if you say, I want a road from here to there, my width that I want it to be at is this. This is how much width I've got to work with. And you could even change that to see different options. And then it could say, okay, when you would say what your maximum slope is, and then it could say, okay, well, here's your options. Here's what that would look like if you were willing to zigzag it and have larger turnarounds at the ends of the points of the zigzag. And here's how it would have to be if you didn't. And I guess you could say whether it's for cars or people, because it may be a stairway, you know? Like I've seen stairways that just go straight up the slope, and they seem unsafe. You know, I mean, they should like go up, stagger across, and then go up again. Or you could have angled ones that go this way, then they go that way, and then they go that way. And, you know, you'd have to think about erosion with that and trail maintenance. And do you want to build it out of stone, which would be recommended, or concrete? Somehow make it stable. And so this particular trail, which would be dirt for now, we could eventually imagine it as stone. And off those corners, we have flat spots where you can sit and enjoy, and there's shade there, and maybe slightly off of it. Having things right on the trail is not as good. God, everything is unsafe here. I almost fell over back there. I could have fallen over. I didn't. I'm very careful, but the rock was behind me, you know. Fuck. Well, I think our next look will be at that gully while we're on site, because you can think about this stuff theoretically, and we need to do that, come up with rule sets for that. But being on site, there's little that is better than that, and being on site with a map is even better. And the ideal, the crazy ideal I imagine, is being able to work with GIS systems where you can just say what you want, and the GIS then suggests what your options are. You know, it knows the land better than you do. It can do the math on it really fast. And, you know, it doesn't know everything. It doesn't know about a cool rock sitting over there, or an extra cool tree that you don't want to cut down because it's so magically wonderful and it took 60 years to grow. And so you can't just install the magic. So that's the reason you have to be on the ground as well. It's like there is no one way of doing it that makes the most sense. There's the theoretical, there's the being on site, there's the GIS, and none of those is really good enough to say that you understand what should happen in that place for maximum best profit for generations to come. This is not just about designing your backyard, right? This is about designing a place that will serve and make that place so valuable that people don't dump garbage in it, that they don't want to destroy it. That's why I even mentioned things like these roads, you know, having 2 road crossings defined, don't you have to develop them, but then you know not to put work into it. Because I also hate the idea of retrofitting. I hate the idea of doing a whole bunch of work on something in a spot and then having to go in and destroy that work because you didn't think ahead. I mean, does it even make sense? Why would you need a road to someone else's property? Well, because we don't know how those are going to work out. In my case, where I live, I actually want to buy the neighbor's property in a lot of cases. I live on a piece of property that is actually 2 sections out of 5. It was a big piece of land that was divided into 5 sections to give it away to the kids. None of those kids now own that land. They all sold it. And so in terms of land use, it would have been better to have them be one big piece of land and have a coherent design that worked well for everyone. And I understand everybody wants their own space and all that, but I want to design for the land, not for the human ownership of it. Of course, you know, all the things I'm talking about are about humans owning land and altering it and doing things like that. But I don't consider that bad. But it's not the right way to design the use of land. The design should come before it gets divided up. I mean, if you were entering a new land, there's a whole bunch of mistakes that are common to make. And most of them are made by the first people who claim to own it. And they take the best place for the richest people and they use it the worst way. And their first thoughts aren't about microclimates and protecting it. And you know, they don't even necessarily imagine that anyone else is even ever going to show up there. They'll just stick their cabin or their house wherever it seems best to them. But it's actually better used for something else in the future. So even though I think civilization is going to collapse, and we're going to have a lot more land per person, and a lot of empty cities to scavenge from, because there's a lot of metal and other materials there, and even to recolonize, to you know, like cities where the population has gone down by 90%, will actually have a whole lot of really useful spaces. And nature will take those over if people don't. We'll see actually an increased rate of evolution there because a whole bunch of ex-cities will become perfect for animals to thrive in. Even Chernobyl is becoming a good place for animals to thrive in. Look, down here there's a nice gully. Isn't used for anything. I should do a design for this gully as well, especially since I would actually like to purchase the property behind me someday. And it's a weird gully. It's a little bit more pointy on the bottom. Well, that's some thoughts on gullies, I guess.